Welcome to Betrayal Narrative X.
I'll never forget the night I came home earlier than usual. My office work had worn me out, and all I wanted was silence, a cold beer, and maybe a conversation with my wife that wouldn't devolve into another pointless argument. But as soon as I opened the door, I realized something was wrong. The apartment was too quiet. It was weird she always left the TV on or had music playing in the background, even if she was just reading something on her phone. I walked deeper in, tossed my keys on the dresser, and suddenly noticed her bag, left carelessly on the kitchen table. It looked like it had been put there in a hurry. And then I heard a sound, a muffled, but still distinctly male voice. I froze, trying to figure out if I just heard it. But then it came again, a whisper, a soft laugh, followed by the sound of a muffled kiss. I took a few steps toward the bedroom, my heart clenched with the sickening foreboding. The door was ajar, and through the crack I saw her, the woman I'd shared my life with, who had sworn her love to me, who was now lying in our bed with another man. I don't remember opening the door. It all happened in seconds. She turned around sharply, eyes wide with horror, and her lover, some young guy, only smirked. He didn't even try to cover himself, like he was enjoying this moment. "Shit, Michael," was all Sarah could breathe out, pulling the sheet over herself in a panic. "What is this?" My voice sounded hoarse, muffled, like I was speaking from underwater. The guy snorted. "I think it's obvious." I looked at him, then at her. The sight of her made me sick. "How long ago?" I almost whispered because my voice was shaking. Sarah opened her mouth, but mewled, and that was enough. I understood without words. This wasn't an isolated incident, not a passing mistake. She hadn't betrayed me for a day or two. "A couple months," she finally said, not looking me in the eye. Everything between us, sleepless nights, dreams, plans, years of life, turned into a lie in an instant. I didn't make a scene. I didn't yell. I just turned around and walked out. The next day I filed for divorce. It's been a year since I saw her with another man. A year since my life had fallen apart. I couldn't say I'd fully recovered, but I no longer felt the emptiness that had haunted me for the first few months after the divorce. At first I tried to dull the pain with alcohol, nights in bars and casual acquaintances that meant nothing. But I soon realized that it didn't help. It only made it worse. Waking up hungover and realizing you were trying to fill a void with something that didn't bring even temporary relief was too pathetic. So I changed tactics. I moved out of our old house and rented a small apartment closer to the city center. A new neighborhood, new streets, new places. I hoped it would help erase the memories. I started spending more time at the gym, loading myself up with workouts so that by the evening only fatigue remained, not thoughts of the past. For the first time in years, I focused only on myself, without trying to please anyone or conform to anyone else's expectations. Work had been my salvation, too. I'd always been good at what I did, but I'd always been distracted by family matters, trying to pay attention to Sarah, making sure she was comfortable, adjusting my plans to her wishes. Now there was nothing stopping me from fully immersing myself in my work. I took on more projects, often stayed late at the office, and sometimes even worked weekends to avoid being alone with my thoughts. My friends tried to take me to parties and introduce me to new women, but I didn't care. Every time I looked at the smiling face of another girl trying to make conversation with me, irritation flared up inside. I didn't want to start all over again. I didn't want to fall in love again, build a relationship, trust, and then find out one day that it was all just an illusion that could fall apart at any moment. Toward the end of the year, I finally felt that I was beginning to change. The pain dulled, and the past seemed distant, almost unreal. I no longer wanted to call her, find out why she did it, or think about what I could have done differently. I accepted the fact that some questions would remain unanswered, and I just had to live with that. I even caught myself not following her social media anymore. At first, of course I did. Pure curiosity, as I tried to convince myself. But every post she made, every new photo with a fake smile and hints of a new life, cut me to the core, especially when he appeared in the frame. That guy, his face haunted my nightmares, even when I didn't want to admit it. Over time, I stopped being interested, blocked her everywhere I could so I wouldn't even accidentally stumble upon her new happy life. I finally felt like I was moving forward. And just when I seemed to be starting to come back to myself, she showed up. I got her text on Friday night when I was about to go to bed. A short, almost emotionless, "Michael, we need to talk. It's important." I stared at the screen, trying to figure out why she was getting back in touch. We had no business together, no reason to talk. We'd split the estate, signed the papers, and I was out of her life as quickly as she'd thrown me out of hers. I didn't answer right away. I walked around the apartment for half an hour, clutching the phone in my hand, wondering if it was even worth getting involved. Something was stirring inside, not anger, no. More like a cold, unpleasant feeling, like anxiety. Finally, I wrote, "What do you need?" The answer came almost instantly. "Let's meet." It's not a phone call. I knew I shouldn't go. I knew nothing good would come of it. But some part of me still wanted to know what she needed after everything that had happened. "Okay, Sarah," I muttered, looking at the screen. "Let's see what you're up to." I texted her the place and time. The next day, at 7 p.m. sharp, I sat in a corner cafe on Broadway, tapping my fingers on a cup of cooling coffee. When the door opened and she walked in, I could see that Sarah had changed. She didn't look as confident as she had a year ago, not as carefree as in the pictures I deleted. There was a tiredness in her eyes and a shadow of some inner struggle on her face. She sat down across from me, and for a second there was silence between us. "Hi, Michael," she finally said. I was silent, looking at her, waiting for her to continue. "I need your help." "Are you serious? After everything that's happened?" "Yeah, and believe me, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't important." "What kind of help?" "I need you to pretend to be my husband." "I'm sorry, what?" I asked, leaning forward a little. She sighed heavily, lowered her gaze, and then looked me in the eye again. "I'm in trouble, Michael. Very serious problems. And you're the only one who can help me." I stared at her, expecting her to laugh and say it was some kind of joke. But her face remained serious, her lips tight, her fingers nervously tugging at the hem of her sleeve. "Say it again." "I need you to pretend to be my husband," she repeated without averting her gaze. I frowned, trying to figure out what the hell was even going on. "Are you out of your mind?" I even chuckled, shaking my head. "We've been divorced for a year. You cheated on me, destroyed our marriage, and now you show up asking for this? I know how it sounds." Her voice shook, but she pulled herself together. "But I really need your help. I don't even want to listen to you. Michael, please. At least let me explain myself." I gritted my teeth, trying to hold back the anger I felt. Everything in me protested against letting her have any influence over my life again. But curiosity was starting to take over. I gestured for her to continue. She swallowed nervously, then looked at me again. "It has to do with my father," she said, and her voice got a little quieter. I blinked, trying to remember the last time I'd heard anything about her family. "What's wrong with him?" "He's dying, Michael." "I'm sorry," I said, but there was no emotion in my voice. "He doesn't know we're divorced," she finally exhaled. "You're telling me you've been lying to him for a year?" "I didn't want to make it worse," she said, not looking me in the eye. "After the diagnosis, the doctors said that any stress could speed up the process. I thought I'd eventually find a way to tell him, but it just got more complicated." "Is that why you need me to pretend to be your husband?" "He asked us to come. He wants to spend his last days with us. And you decided to drag me back into your lies. I don't know what to do, Michael. If he finds out the truth now, it'll kill him." I exhaled sharply, fighting the urge to just get up and leave. "It's not my problem, Sarah. You chose this path." She nodded, but there was a desperate plea in her eyes. "I know I don't deserve your help, but please don't do it for me. Do it for him. He's always loved you, thought of you as his son. I'm just asking you to pretend for a couple weeks." I stared at her, trying to decide if I should even think about it. She betrayed me, broke my heart, lied to me, and now she wants me to be part of another lie. But her father, he's really always been good to me. When Sarah and I first started dating, he took me in like family. I knew he was sick, but I didn't realize how serious it was. I closed my eyes, trying to deal with the storm of emotions inside. "And who is this new boyfriend of yours? Why can't he play your husband?" She froze, then looked away. "We're not together anymore," she squeezed out, avoiding my gaze. I raised an eyebrow, feeling slightly surprised. "Is that so? He wasn't who he said he was. It's good to hear that karma works after all." She wrinkled her nose, but remained silent. I looked at her again, weighing the pros and cons. On the one hand, it was a crazy plan. I didn't want to be a part of her life again, even temporarily. But on the other hand, the man who treated me like a son is dying, and his last wish is to see me by his daughter's side. If I accept, what do I have to do? Her eyes flashed with hope. "Just be around for a couple weeks. Play along that everything's okay." "Okay, Sarah, but just know one thing. Once these 2 weeks are up, I'm out of your life forever." "Thank you, Michael. Really, thank you." I didn't answer because I wasn't completely sure I was doing the right thing. But something told me that those 2 weeks would turn my life upside down more than the divorce itself. I never thought I'd be around her again, much less as her husband. But here I am, sitting in my car, a few hours out of town, looking at the winding road and thinking about how damn foolish I was to get into this. Sarah was in the passenger seat, staring out the window, and didn't seem to like what was happening either. We didn't talk most of the way, just exchanged a couple of casual phrases at the beginning of the drive. There was a tension in the air that made me want to just turn around and drive the hell away. "Thank you for agreeing," she finally said without turning her head. I only hummed, not taking my eyes off the road. "Don't be under any illusions, Sarah. I'm not here for you. I understand." We drove in silence again for a few minutes until I decided to ask the question that had been bugging me. "How long were you going to hide our divorce?" "I don't know. At first I thought I'd tell him in a couple months, but then he got worse. And when the doctor said he didn't have much time left, I just couldn't. And you thought it would be easier to drag me back into your lies? I didn't want to involve you, but I have no other choice. There's always a way out, Sarah. You were just more comfortable leaving it alone." "Maybe you're right," she muttered. I didn't say anything back. To be honest, I was sick of discussing it. We both made our choices, and now all I had to do was play my part and disappear after it was over. After a couple hours, we turned onto a long driveway leading to a large house, surrounded by trees. I remembered this place. This was where we'd once spent holidays, barbecuing in the backyard, laughing, talking. Back then, I still believed Sarah was the woman I would spend the rest of my life with. When we parked, the door to the house opened, and her father appeared on the porch. He looked old and gaunt, but when his eyes fell on me, his face lit up with joy. "Michael." His voice sounded weaker than I remembered, but there was still so much warmth in it that I felt guilty for a moment. "Good to see you, sir. I thought you'd forgotten about the old man." "Of course not. Dad, you need to save your strength. Come on, Sarah. Let me be happy that my son-in-law is finally here." I felt something inside me clench unpleasantly. The words my son-in-law sounded so natural, so sincere, that I felt uncomfortable. Sarah only smiled, holding her father's hand tightly, and I mentally reminded myself that it was just an act. We entered the house, and immediately a wave of memories came flooding back. Old photographs on the walls, cozy armchairs, the smell of apple pie that his late wife used to make. "We have a room for you, too," he said, pointing to the stairs. I froze for a moment, but then forced myself to nod. Of course, he'd expect us to sleep in the same room. When we got upstairs, I closed the door behind us and gave Sarah a hard look. "I hope you don't think I'm going to sleep in the same bed with you." She rolled her eyes, sighing irritably. "Relax, Michael. I'll make my own bed on the couch." I nodded, still feeling the tension in my body. "Good, because I'm not here to play happy family life any more than necessary." She pressed her lips together, but answered nothing. I sat up on the bed, ran my hand over my face, and inhaled deeply. "How long do we have to keep this up?" Sarah shrugged, looking out the window. 2 weeks. Maybe less if Daddy's condition worsens sooner. Hopefully it will be easier than it looks. But for some reason, there was a growing feeling inside me that nothing easy was going to come of it. I thought the 2 weeks would go by quickly, but by the second day I realized how wrong I was. Ever since this morning, everything reminded me of the past, the life I'd once built with Sarah. Her father acted as if she and I were still together. In his eyes, we were still the same couple who loved each other and dreamed of the future. "How have you been since the wedding?" he asked at breakfast, smiling like a happy parent who had finally seen his children together. I froze with a cup of coffee in my hand, feeling everything inside clench. Sarah was the first to find the words. "Everything's great, Dad. We're happy." I felt my jaw tense. Happy? It was stupid to even hear it out of her mouth. He nodded, satisfied with the answer, and switched to talking about the local news. I pretended to listen, but I was actually angry. After breakfast, I went out on the porch, hoping for a moment of solitude, but Sarah soon followed me out. "You could at least try to look convincing," she said, crossing her arms over her chest. I turned to her slowly, not hiding my irritation. "Do you really think it's easy for me to sit there and pretend like I'm happy? I don't expect you to enjoy it. Just help me through it, okay?" I looked at her, trying to see if she really realized how hard I was making it. "I'm doing the best I can," I replied, my voice sounding harsher than I wanted it to. "Thank you, Michael." I turned away, looking into the distance, where the forest stretched out in a thick wall. "Let's just do it and part ways for good." She was silent, and I didn't even try to guess what she was thinking. Every corner of the house was filled with memories. In the living room, there was still the same couch where we used to watch movies, wrapped in the same plaid. In the kitchen, the wooden table where she had once laughed while making breakfast. It all felt like painful torture. But the worst part was sharing a room with her. Every night was an agonizing ordeal. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling while she settled on the small couch by the window. There were a few steps between us, but really a chasm. One night, as I was beginning to fall asleep, she suddenly spoke. "Michael, did you ever think you could forgive me?" "What do you want to hear, Sarah?" "Just the truth. Once upon a time, maybe I would have wanted that. But now I realize that some things can't be forgiven. I know I broke you. You didn't just break me, Sarah. You erased everything we had." She didn't say anything else. I closed my eyes, hoping that when I opened them, the lie would finally be over. The next day, our play was almost derailed. By lunchtime, I was outside when a car pulled up in front of the house. A woman I recognized immediately got out. Ashley, Sarah's best friend. I clenched my teeth, already knowing what that meant. "Oh my God, Michael." Her eyes widened as she stepped closer. "I thought you'd burned all your bridges after the divorce." I frowned, casting a quick glance at the house. "What are you doing here, Ashley? Sarah didn't tell me you two were back together." "It's none of your business," I replied, hoping that was enough. "I think Sarah will explain it to me," she said as she headed towards the house. I held my breath, knowing it could all come crashing down now. A moment later, Sarah stepped out onto the porch, her face pale when she saw her friend. "Ashley, I wasn't expecting to see you." "Obviously." Ashley grinned, shifting her gaze from her to me. "Why don't you tell me why you've been lying to me for a year?" Sarah tensed, but quickly found her way out. "I didn't want anyone interfering in our lives." Ashley hummed and looked at me, then back at Sarah. "Are you sure that's what he thinks, too?" I felt like Sarah was waiting for me to say something. "I still love her." Ashley squinted, trying to figure out if I was lying or not. Sarah, on the other hand, was standing next to me with her hands clasped together, and I didn't know what was on her mind. But then I realized one thing. I'm going to have to play this part a lot better than I thought I would. I expected Ashley to just grin, throw in a sarcastic remark, and walk away. But instead she stood there, glaring at me with a look of obvious distrust. "Do you still love her?" she repeated, slowly crossing her arms over her chest. "Yes," I answered calmly, though everything inside me protested at those words. Ashley looked at Sarah, and I noticed her face tense up. "I wonder why you told me differently then." "Because I wasn't sure how things were going to work out," she said in a flat voice. "I didn't want to involve anyone until I knew how I felt." Ashley nodded slowly, but there was a slight sneer in her eyes. "I see. So you just decided to keep it a secret?" I could see that Sarah was nervous, so I decided to take control of the situation. We weren't hiding anything. We just wanted to sort ourselves out without commentary. Ashley looked at me, then at Sarah, then back at me. "Okay, so tell me, Michael." She paused, as if deliberately stretching the tension. "What's Sarah's favorite movie?" I frowned, surprised by such a question, but quickly realized her intent. "Once Upon a Time in Rome," I answered, almost without thinking. Ashley squinted slightly, clearly hoping I was wrong. "What's your favorite dish?" "Pasta with porcini mushrooms, but only if she makes it herself." Sarah gave me a quick glance, and I thought something akin to surprise flashed in her eyes. "Okay, what does she hate the most?" I smirked, shaking my head. "When she gets interrupted in the middle of a sentence." Sarah rolled her eyes, but couldn't hold back a slight smile. Ashley watched us carefully, then nodded slowly. "That's good. It looks convincing. But I still don't believe it." I sighed, feeling the irritation boiling up inside me. "You know, Ashley, you may or may not believe that. We don't really care." Sarah nodded, deciding to play along. "The important thing is that we're happy, not what you think." Ashley shrugged, but there was still wariness in her eyes. All right. I won't ruin the moment." She paused, then grinned and added, "I hope you won't be offended if I stay a couple days." I felt everything tense up inside. Sarah visibly tensed as well, but didn't show it. "Sure, stay," she said with a strained smile. Ashley nodded, clearly pleased with her little victory. "Oh, good. Let's see how well you're doing." She turned around and walked back into the house, leaving us on the porch. I exhaled slowly, then looked at Sarah. "She doesn't believe us." "Yeah, I got it. If she exposes us, your father will know the truth. We just have to be more careful. All this shit could come crashing down at any moment." We can handle it. I sighed, but didn't say anything back, because there was a growing feeling inside me that this was just the beginning. Dinner passed under Ashley's gaze. She watched our every move, as if trying to catch the slightest falsity. Sarah tried to look relaxed, but I could see her fingers nervously rubbing the edge of the napkin. I felt like Ashley was stalling on purpose, asking unnecessary questions, stretching out the conversation. "And how are your plans for the future?" she asked innocently, smiling. I glanced quickly at Sarah, but she had already found the answer. "We're just enjoying life so far. No rush." Ashley nodded, but I thought I saw disappointment in her eyes. She expected us to be confused, to say something contradictory, but so far we've held on. After dinner, I went out on the veranda and had a smoke, even though I had long since quit. Sarah followed, crossing her arms over her chest. "Did you start smoking again?" I grinned, letting out a puff of smoke. "No, it's just too lousy a day." She nodded slowly, then leaned against the railing next to me. For a few minutes we were silent. "Do you really remember all that?" she suddenly asked. I looked at her, not immediately realizing what she was talking about. "Which is what?" "The movie. A movie. Things that annoy me." I grinned, shaking off the ashes. "Of course you did. I really knew you." She lowered her gaze, then said quietly, "Michael, I'm sorry. It's too late, Sarah." She nodded, but didn't leave. I put out my cigarette and turned to her, looking straight into her eyes. "Let's just end this play and never pretend again." "All right." Chuckles. But I could feel that something in her head snapped. Or maybe I'm just too tired to deal with it. I thought this play couldn't get any more absurd. But that night I realized how wrong I was. When it got dark, I went outside to be alone for a little while. The air was cool, and I inhaled deeply, trying to calm my thoughts. Everything seemed so fake that it made me sick. I was just about to walk back in when I heard voices from inside the house. "Are you sure he doesn't suspect anything?" "He doesn't know." "He doesn't have to know," Sarah said. "You do realize that if this gets out, it'll be a disaster?" "I'll handle it, as long as he doesn't figure it out." I felt a chill run down my back. They were talking about me. I backed away slowly, trying to digest what I had heard. What wasn't I supposed to know? When I got back to my room, I lay in the dark for a long time, trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Sarah had been acting weird this whole time. She'd been nervous, avoiding certain topics, and now this conversation with Ashley. What's she hiding? I was just starting to fall asleep when I heard a quiet knock on the door. I slowly sat up on the bed, casting a quick glance at the sleeping Sarah. The knocking was repeated, cautious, almost inaudible. I walked over, quietly opened the door, and froze. Standing in front of me was a man I certainly didn't expect to see. "Shit," I whispered, looking at him stunned. "This is impossible." Standing on the doorstep was the same guy I'd caught Sarah in bed with a year ago. "We need to talk," he wheezed, looking around nervously. I didn't understand anything. What are you doing here?" He swallowed, clearly agonizing with an internal struggle. "It's about Sarah. You need to know the truth." "Are you kidding me? After all this, you dare come to me?" "Listen, Michael. This is important. Everything she told you is a lie." I tensed, looking him straight in the eye. "What do you mean?" He glanced around nervously, then moved closer. "I'm not who you think I am." I squinted skeptically. "Oh yeah? Then who the hell are you?" He took a deep breath. "I'm a private investigator. I was hired to follow Sarah." I froze, feeling the world around me turn upside down. "What? She didn't just cheat on you, Michael. She tried to destroy you." I took a step back, feeling the ground go from under my feet. "That's bullshit." "It's true. You've been set up, Michael." I stared at him, trying to comprehend his words. "Framed? Why?" He swallowed, then continued. "Sarah, she's not who she says she is. Speak plainly. She killed a man, Michael." I recoiled as if I'd been hit. "What are you talking about?" "I followed her when she and I were dating. It was actually an assignment." "Who did she kill?" "Your true lover." What?" "The one she cheated on you with. He tried to leave her. She couldn't take it." "No. It's true, Michael. And now she's pulled you into her game." I looked at him, then at the door where Sarah was sleeping. "Does she know you're here?" "No. And if she finds out, I'm dead." I slowly closed my eyes, trying to gather my thoughts. If he was right, then I was in the house with the killer. My head was pounding, my thoughts jumbled, and my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it pounding in my temples. Everything I knew, all the hate, all the pain, all of it suddenly turned upside down. If this man was telling the truth, Then my whole life with Sarah was a lie. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to focus. Prove it, I breathed out, looking straight into his eyes. He pulled his phone out of his pocket, unlocked the screen, and showed me some pictures. They were of Sarah, but not the Sarah I knew. Her face was twisted with rage, her hands stained with something dark, and the body of a man lying on the floor next to her. I swallowed, feeling a chill run down my back. Who's that? His name was Jason Miller. He was her lover, but then he decided to break it off, and He fell silent, but I didn't need to hear the continuation. I looked away from the screen, hardly realizing I was looking at evidence that could send Sarah to jail. How did she cover it up? Bribery, manipulation, lies. She's got police connections. I ran my hand over my face, trying to digest what I'd heard. Why are you telling me this? He put the phone away, then looked me in the eye. Because now she wants to get rid of you. I tensed involuntarily, feeling a shiver run through my body. Are you sure about this? She didn't just ask you to come here. She lured you into a trap. Shit. Listen to me. You have two choices. Either you disappear right now, or you risk being next. Why didn't you just expose her? I tried, but she has too much leverage. Why me? She's afraid you know something. I looked at the door behind where Sarah slept and felt a growing rage. All these years she's been playing me, making a fool of me. I exhaled, then looked at him. What am I supposed to do? Run now. I shook my head, feeling a completely different feeling flare up inside. No. What? I turned to him, eyes burning with icy determination. I'm not just going to run away. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. You don't realize who you're dealing with. I grinned bitterly, feeling anger spill through my veins. No, I get it now. I turned around and headed back to the house, my heart pounding frantically. When I entered the room, Sarah was already awake. She sat on the bed, looking at me, and her eyes were wary. Where have you been? She asked quietly, as if testing my reaction. I stood in the doorway watching her, a grim satisfaction growing in my chest. Just thinking about us. Her eyes widened slightly, but she quickly pulled herself together. Michael, is something wrong? I slowly moved closer, crouched on the edge of the bed, holding her gaze. Tell me about Jason Miller. Her face froze for a moment. Just 1 second, but it was enough for me. Who? Don't lie, Sarah. I leaned closer, looking into her eyes. I know everything. She didn't move, but I saw something like fear flicker in her eyes. Who told you that? It doesn't matter. What matters is what you did. Michael, I never wanted you to find out. Oh, I'm sure. You have to understand, I didn't mean for this to happen. It's too late, Sarah. She frowned, then slowly straightened up. What are you going to do? What do you think? You can't hurt me, Michael. I leaned toward her, then whispered, We'll see. She didn't look away, but I saw her fingers clench into a fist. Emotion struggled inside her: fear, distrust, anger, maybe even regret. Michael. Her voice sounded quieter than usual, almost uncertain. You don't understand. No, Sarah. You're the one who doesn't understand. I slowly straightened up, looking down at her. You want revenge? You think it'll make a difference? I grinned, shaking my head. It's not going to make a difference anymore. Then just go away, Michael. Get out of my life. I stared at her for a few seconds, then turned away, heading for the door. I will, I said without turning around. Sarah didn't follow, didn't try to stop me. She knew that there was nothing left between us, no trust, no love, not even the hatred that had held us together all this time. It was over. I got in the car, started the engine, and drove out onto the road, without even looking back. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. If you liked the story, please give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm show my content more often. If you are new to the channel, do not forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep making more stories for you.